Hi, everybody. This is Laurie Handlers, and you're listening to Sex and Happiness, a show about your sex and your happiness. And today I have an amazing guest. Her name is Eurydice, and we are going to talk about sex and politics. So let me tell you a little bit about her. She's in Florida right now, actually, but she was born on the island of Lesbos in Greece. And she's a writer, an artist, an activist, and an archivist, a multi model scholar, mentor, and advocate. She's the author of quite a few books: Satyricon, The Second Coming, and the creator of Speak Sex with Eve podcast. This is a very talented woman. She's an artist and a scholar. I'm going to say that about you. When I think of scholars, I think of Greece. So she's very well grounded in and versed in sex and politics and how patriarchy and Me Too and everything influences everything else. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And hopefully you, my listeners and viewers, are going to get an education. So Eve, welcome to Sex and Happiness podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you and to just get to know you, to get to know you.
Likewise.
So let's roll them back just a little bit. I love to always ask my guests how they became who they are. So like what influenced you? Like I happen to know you've told me that you grew up in a little island in Greece and it was small and everyone knew each other and the town, et cetera, et cetera. So how did you become interested in like being a scholar and writing and researching how sex and gender affects politics, et cetera? How did you become you?
Yeah. Well, there are many little beginnings. The first one was that my mother was married, my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, they were all breeders. Their parents kind of like gave them to a man who came and asked for their hand in marriage. And then they stayed married to this man for the rest of their lives. So as far back as I know, which is hundreds of generations really, because we're very stationary as a lineage. The women, as soon as they came of maiden age, depended on a man and belonged to a man and went from one man to another. So my mom was really unhappy with her marriage. She missed her mom. She just like suddenly was with a man she didn't know, having sex, which was what we would now call like rape, marital rape, because she didn't know anything about sex. She was a virgin. She'd never kissed. And she conceived really fast. So from being like a pretty girl, the daughter of the village priest, the town priest, kind of like spoiled by her mom, she was on her own, like washing the clothes of this man, trying to make meals of this man with a child, losing her mind. So she, my first memories were of my mother crying a lot and kind of hating on me a little bit. She called me like demon child because I'd ruined her life.
So you're child number one.
I'm child number one. Yeah.
Got it.
So at the age of about two and a half, I broke my femur because my mom had left me with a neighbor and I fell well, and the neighbor wasn't interested. I spent about 6 months in bed. And during that time, I taught myself to read and write. People would bring me out of pity, I guess, little children's books, and my parents, one or the other would read me the book when they had time, and then I would hear it, memorize it, and then learn from what I'd memorized and the turning of the pages, right? So I experienced first this change in my fortunes when my father realized that I was reading and started giving me more books. He started calling the man, like from the coffee shop, into the house and have me in my bed, with in my body in a cast, like perform to them in a sense, read, like he would be like, read, and the man would be like, wow, this little child reads, and I learned, because such a formative age, that language and doing what men liked, got me out of my place of like having to follow my mom around and be hit in the head and not speak. She'd be like, be quiet, and if I asked why, she would be like, there is no why. It's all written in the book of fate. There's a why. We'll never ask why. Why would just get you asking why. So, but books would give me answers. So I started to read. So in fact, I kind of progressed fast enough that my parents moved to Athens and my dad got a job at the ministry. So I would go to like whatever the best public school there. And soon I memorized like Homer, I remember. So my dad would take me in front of the minister to like, recite Homer. So it's an interesting thing, because at the same time that I was learning that I could escape like the fate, of my sexual gender in this way. And my dad was like, don't tell her, like, don't teach her how to cook. Don't have her do laundry. She has she's a writer. She's she has a mind. Let her be with her books. So I got a break. But at the same time, I discovered something else. I was a lesbian. I didn't know I was a lesbian until I came to the school. And then at some point, I think it was third grade, I realized that the word lesbian was a dirty word, that I should never say I was a lesbian. Now, I was a lesbian by birth. So I was a lesbian with a capital L. But I could not say that because I would be, like stigmatized, and even my girlfriends would not want to hang out with me. And so I had to make up an alternate like narrative for myself because of the shame associated with like my toponym, because my toponym was also like a sexual preference. So that kind of like mindfuck was very, very formative again. Sure. And I think those two connections.
I wanted to say something to you, because you and I had the last time we were speaking, you and I had some things in common, about like feeling like marriage was a prison or whatever. But we also, this thing about being a smart girl child, number one, and a smart girl child, and the father would take you places and say, perform, read, do this. I had the same experience. So it's crazy how you and I are alike in certain ways, but I had the same experience of my father saying, my mother saying, don't teach her, and my father, don't teach her to cook, don't teach her to do laundry, don't teach her to clean. She's going to be very smart, and she will have other people do those things for her. So I just had to, when you said that, I was like, that happened in my background too. Anyway, go ahead. Then you went on to, then you realized that
so basically everything went on this way until I hit puberty and I started like looking for boys, and then my dad went, or girls, boys, whatever. And also I grew up in a junta. The junta fell, so I became politicized. It was a time when everyone in Greece was, discovering democracy, socialism. And my dad became very threatened. Everyone else in the family had always told him, you're creating like a monster with giving her so much freedom. And, he would be like, no, she's a genius. And now, like, he was like, oh my God, maybe you're right. Like, why is she sounding like that? Because I was reading like surrealists. And so at that late stage, when I was like 13, he decides to discipline me, and make me like fit in, and, beat me up and whatever, trying to get me to like stay home and be a good girl and go to church and, not wear pants, like crazy stuff. So I ran away from home when I was, before I turned 15, and I went to LA. And my love, I must say, like a week into being there, and I met an amazing woman. She was a librarian. She took me in like the first day. She said, we'll figure out, things. Like I went to the library. And
of course you did.
I went to the library for the books because it's like I could figure things out if I, and I went home with a librarian lady who was divorced. And so she's like my other, my main female role model, because she was the first woman I met who had divorced her husband. She had a dog living with her, sleeping in her bed, which is unheard of in my world, and she, like dump the laundry, take it to the cleaners, just, she smoked, she had some scotch. I had never seen a woman like this before. She loved Greece. She was Greek dancing, with other friends who were not Greek. And she enrolled me in the local school, and within about a week, I'm going to say, the kids there took me to see Rocky Horror Picture Show.
That's awesome.
And you can imagine, like, the culture, like euphoria. I was like, I landed in heaven. Like, these people, can be any gender and can do everything. And the imagination is endless, and the school, like, that were, like, indigenous people and Hispanic people and, all kinds of people of color and Jewish people and the yogis and it's California. It was just such an amazing, diverse society. And I had come from such an extremely homogenized, proper society where everything was just so, because we've been around a long time. So it was very, again, I was still being formed. I was still a child. I didn't, know it at the time. And I became, I became more and more kind of like, this person, a feminist. And then I went to the East Village the next year. I went to NYU at 16 and studied, writing, creative writing there. And then after that, I went to Boulder to work with Allen Ginsberg and Bill Burroughs, and got also a master's there at CU. And then from there, I went to Brown, took a break so got another couple of degrees at Brown, and then took a break from academia, went to live in India for 3 years.
Oh, nice.
Learned a lot. Came back, taught at Brown, and then, and in the meantime, I wrote those books. And then a couple of books, the F-32 and The Second Coming, which was published by Virago Press, which is a feminist press in England that, they're amazing women. And then I got a job. I left teaching. I left teaching because I got a job at Spin Magazine as an investigative writer. And I wrote the Sex Files series. And that was, and I discovered how much I liked, I didn't want to be like, I was young still, and I didn't want to like be gate kept in academia, where like what I was saying was only being heard by like the, elite, let's say, young people who would get into my class. Yes. So this gave me a much bigger platform, and I liked that. Then I published a book with Scribner. And then, like, really right before the book tour, I accidentally, conceived. Like the day, I think it was the day after my period or two. So I had unprotected sex, but it was literally like a day or two after. I didn't think I could have eggs. I did.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I'm pro-choice. The father to be, of course, was like, get an abortion. I can't be a dad. I'm like I'm not. I don't want to. It's not my life's plan. And I couldn't. So I really loved this child, and that changed my life a lot in the sense of little by little. I accommodated my practices to motherhood. Yeah. And first, I gave birth, and I really I went with my purse. I didn't have an outfit. I didn't have like a car seat. Like, I didn't know anything about children. None of my friends had children. I just thought, I'm going to give birth. I have a dog. Everybody says I'm a great dog mom. I'll have this.
You'll have a child.
Girl too. And in the beginning, like I would just take her everywhere to meetings and research, and she just hang. But then when she needed to like speak and socialize and go to school, it became a choice. So that's when I got into art. I like on a whim applied to a cooperative which is in the main street in Miami Beach on Lincoln Road. And Art Basel had just come to Lincoln Road, and 9/11 had just happened. And I thought, I don't want to raise my kid in New York. I can be on the beach. Basel makes this place a little more like cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
And I got in. They liked my work, and I focused on stitching. So for me, motherhood was like a way to marry my halves, right?
Your culture.
To try to connect that split that every woman has, because we speak the language of the patriarchy and we're trained with our mind as if we're men, but we have this female, embodiment, which gets devalued. So as I nourished her and nursed her, and I did a lot of artwork which involved embroidery, and I literally like stitch by stitch, it was very meditative, was kind of like relearning and rethinking and reconfiguring everything that I had thought about, all these years of like studying and writing feminism and about the patriarchy and women's lives and women's place. And it was basically, it was a practice. I mean, I lived off selling the art because that studio space was a great, had a lot of foot traffic, and it was subsidized. It was in the most like busy street in Miami Beach. But in the process of completing each series, I would also like learn a lesson which I would put into writing. So
I'm going to interrupt you here for a second because this is fascinating, really fascinating. And I just want to get to, like, it feels to me like I just see if I got this right. It feels to me like you disavowed being a female because you had privilege in the beginning, and then you ran away. You did whatever you wanted, which most girls don't get to do. Not girls from Greece anyway. They don't get to do that.
No, I got the tattoo. My first tattoo, I was 18 in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Amazing, like, real lesbian, butch lesbian.
So you got to do what you wanted to do. You created life on your own terms, and then you came back to some root.
Yeah.
I want to say prefrontal cortex, like somewhere else in your body, you came upon like the art and the expression of femininity, of femaleness, something through this history, and you sold that. That became your commercialism. Like that's like amazing.
Yeah.
So just when you were thinking of the politics, like to me, I'm just like, how did you sort that all out?
Yeah. Well, it was, so basically I think what I did was take a break from logos, from language, from being a writer. I had already found that, the market forces were trying to commercialize me, I had an agent at ICM. She wanted me to write, being a pregnant sex writer. It just felt like, and also became the beginning of like the explosion of like memoirs by women, which is great. I'm glad they were writing them. I want them all to write and tell their stories. But I was not needed per se. And what I was needing was to kind of understand I put the mind that had been trained in a masculine way aside to make space, to open space for the embodied experience, which could not be put in words. So that's, stitching was like the one thing that I had seen my mom taught me, my grandma taught me, my aunt taught me. They would like do it in the porch. on the porch, in the afternoons, and work would like stay in the trunks. The men never saw it. It was invisible. Like if the women decorated the house, no one paid attention to it except other women, but this was your dowry. So when you marry, that's what you take from home, is this tchotchkes, is this
tablecloth,
embroideries.
napkins,
Right. Things that they make,
blankets.
bed covers,
Yeah.
all the doilies. And that's like, as a woman, your heritage. But it's
I'm cracking
worthless
up.
in like the marketplace,
Yeah, yeah. I'm cracking up because I know how to do all those things.
You do?
Taught,
No
I
way.
was taught to sew, embroider, crochet, and knit
Wow.
by my grandmother,
Yeah.
by our housekeeper, and by my mother. My mother, I have in my home, I have embroidered tablecloths and napkins from my mother.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah.
you're just saying all this stuff, and you're like, I now make a line of clothing. This is part of it.
Wow.
I make it with a man from
Wow.
India. Like I
Wow.
I design
Wow.
things with a man from India who lives in Australia, but we have everything made in India. So it's like, so
Yeah.
you're like, I don't have a parallel life to you, but I have enough of an overlap that it's
Yeah.
amazing that you were doing that for
Yeah.
art. I was
When I was,
embroidering when I was a hippie. I
yes.
was embroidering jeans. I was embroidering flowers on
Yeah.
one leg of the jeans and putting beads in,
Yeah.
little plastic beads into the center of all the flowers. Or I was embroidering people's jackets, their hippie jeans
Yeah.
jackets. So it's just
Yeah.
amazing what you're saying. But all the
Yeah.
time you're thinking politics, and all the
The
time I
whole
was,
time I'm like digesting what I'm learning from the practice, and that's why, and I often speak about this. It takes time, change, coming up with a quick idea, and hearing to like call it something and put it out there, and trademark it and monetize it, sure. But the value is something that has taken a lot of time. Value is time. It's not money, and it takes a lot of time to understand something that's so fundamental. So what a simple thing that I understood. I mean, I was teaching a lot of, all of my work is women's bodies. And I stitched stuff about 9/11. I did a lot of political work during Abu, Ghraib and all. And I stitched on plexi and metal and wood and charcoal pieces, and uh, and that practice, the repetition of that, kind of like slowed down the expectations of society of me, and that, as well as like the back and forth with teaching my daughter who to be in the world, kind of clarified for me the inevitable dichotomy, split that I had lived in my whole like liberated feminist life, which was, for example, in one way, my mind was male and my body was female. So like I used my body to get off. I kind of like pimped off my body sexually because I didn't think of it as I was here, and then I had this stuff that,
I
I was
get it.
using. And,
That's so good.
trying to teach her how to be in the world, I ended up using like two languages always at the same time. I would be, and I had also two identities. I was like Eve in the school and Eurydice in the studio. And I signed my books as Eurydice. So the mothers at the school didn't really know what I do. And my daughter understood, so I explained to her, we live in a patriarchy, we don't believe in it. So I'm going to teach you two things about everything. I will teach you my truth, and I will teach you what the world does so you can fit in and you can speak that and you can perform that. But at the same time, I will tell you what's really happening. And it was almost like, this. So the way of having to explain the most basic things to her,
Yeah.
was so useful for me. because it helped me get back to like the most basic things of life as she was growing up, and how to give her agency, and choice, rather than like right and wrong from the beginning, from the get-go. So I think that it was a great lesson in how the feminine or the female differs, what our strength is, and how to bring together the two, which like I knew the split when I was 21 and I wrote about the vagina being cut off. I knew that, right? But how to reconnect in a way that was that used the only language we have, which is the language of the patriarchy, and yet could shift the culture, was what I was, trying to do. And I feel that I'm in a good place right now, and COVID has been, in a sense, useful, very, very revelatory, because a lot of these things have become so much more obvious, where our activities are restricted, so we see things more clearly because we pay more attention.
We have to. We have to. I have questions for you about your daughter. What is she? She's in college now?
Yeah, she's studying human rights.
Human rights she's studying.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. I could see
she went to the only school that has a human rights degree at the Hannah Arendt Center. And she wants to be a human rights lawyer. So we'll see.
I can see how that is a direct outcome of like you putting the split back together and her saying, okay, how can I make a difference in this crazy world?
I know. Yeah.
So amazing. What a wonderful, I didn't know what to expect when I asked you that. So so now I'm going to ask you some practical questions. Like, a woman listening to this show, one of my listeners, who's my loyal listener, listening to this show, who's hearing maybe for the first time, wow, you, woman, could be living in your mind, not embodied. I have a few questions like this. You're living in your mind, you're not embodied. Maybe you're married and you've been doing this thing like Eve would have done if she was stayed in Greece.
Yeah.
Her mother married her off to some man, which your mother didn't. You didn't give her the chance.
No.
What should she do if this is the first spark of this kind of thinking?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm living in my head, doing what the patriarchy has told me, even what my mother's told me, because she's living in the patriarchy. What should I do if I want to have agency or I want to have sovereignty? What's the first thing I should think about or do or check out? What should I read? What should I listen to? What should I take on?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not, I try to not, monetize my work because I want it to be from the heart. I do have the podcast, Speak Sex with Eve, and it's everywhere. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on, it's free. It will always be free. It doesn't have commercials. It's, 100% from the heart, and it talks about this stuff. And it's an introduction for sure. I have a YouTube channel, Speak Sex with Eve. I am working, I'm pretty much done with these books and that I have been working on, which is the Speak Sex book. And by speaking sex, it's not how to have sex. It's how to speak in a way, in whatever language you use every day, but with a different valuation, with a different emphasis. So you're conscious of what you say and you consciously say them in a different way. Instead of going like the way that we've been taught.
Instead of being a good little girl.
Right. Instead of just doing what you're told. Yeah. And, becoming conscious of our bondage, I think is very important, and becoming conscious of our foremothers, this is not, it's a really, the weight of the millions of women we're talking about is awesome. It's not just you, with your like rights and your vote and your wine and your lunches and your girlfriends and your shopping online. It's not just you, it is your kids, but it's also all those people who came behind you, before you, who were like kept in. So it's just such an extreme kind of like imprisonment of the female. And I believe that it stems from the womb, it stems from motherhood, it stems from the ability of the female to create life. So it's what the patriarchy is particularly interested in is the product of the womb. Woman had the power to reproduce. So yes, the man is the inseminator, but the woman like puts the work, gives it 9 months of her life and gives it her body and 2 years of whatever, or nursing, and then also her heart, because the mother becomes more powerful than the self. So in that, right. And that's the selflessness that the patriarchy takes advantage of to kind of get us to go along for the sake of our children, for the sake of. So the first thing to do is become conscious. And the second thing to do is become conscious by thinking about it, exposing yourself. And the second thing to do is to let go of fear, because going into the unknown is so much more rewarding, and you will be taken care of. You will be taken care of. You have to believe that you will be taken care of. So you don't need to depend on the men. You are such an example.
You are speaking you're preaching to my choir.
Perfect.
You're speaking to my heart. Now I have an opposite question for you. I mean, It's going to be crazy, topsy-turvy, but I'm doing it because you're so articulate about this in a way that it's like you've thought out both sides in a way that I haven't experienced anybody else coming from both sides. So now my other question, which may seem crazy after the question I just asked you, is, if you're an angry Me Too feminist, if you're listening to this, because I have some listeners like that too. If you're so angry and you're so mad at men and you're so mad at the patriarchy, and you're listening to this, you're listening to Eve, and but you're so like unsettled inside. Like nothing is feeling good to you. You just want to cut off balls, but you don't, it's not coming to anything. Like it's not leading to anything productive unless unless you're writing a book about it. But something that like you're so unsettled because of the effects of the patriarchy. How can you come back to inner peace? How can you let go of hatred, let go of torment and anger, and come to peace? Because the other half of the planet is people in male bodies who, many of them are not really trying to do anything wrong. Like they're part of the same dogma. They're imprisoned. Correct. In my opinion, they're imprisoned by the same dogma.
I agree. I think so too. Yeah.
So then what? So then what? What would you recommend to them? I mean, I feel like you're like one of the most brilliant people that I've met in the last decade. So I'm asking you tough questions because you're a person who's thought about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that, if you see yourself as someone who has been victimized by the patriarchy in the way of Me Too, this is our revenge. Our revenge is not to outman the men. Our revenge is to outwoman, to find the woman, to kind of like resist and defy the expectation that we play the role by their, but by what the patriarchy has set up for all genders, and instead kind of like rebel in a more fundamental way that models a lifestyle and a behavior that doesn't have to follow the dichotomy, of like bottom top or the hierarchy. And I do agree with you that I think it is liberating for men as well to not have to have this burden and this responsibility and this like representation of all that bullshit, and to be able to speak, to cry, to have emotions, to be weak, to be feminine, to whatever. So I think it is a way to liberate us both. But for women in particular, I feel that we do need to continue to work for social change. So I don't really think that just one-on-one change in your own life is enough. So I would say to the Me Too feminist, in your own life, find your woman, find your nurturer, find the slowness of the feminine, find, the rest, the pleasure, the luxury that is inherent in the feminine, that is not validated by the patriarchy. Do the stuff that you're not gonna get approval for, that you're not gonna get like respect for, that's resistance. But also at the same time, work for social change. And when it comes to social change, we have to do it in the ways of the world, So like, for example, I believe that we have to find a way to monetize motherhood, differently as a culture, separately from like the individual model of marriage.
Yes.
So, for me, that's like a very clear start of point, So I would say that between now and the 23rd century, that's the work to be done, and we need to like spread the word and bring everybody in. Just, bring everybody in, to me, makes sense, because we all suffer, none of us have an existence outside of the setup.
Exactly.
It's been like 6,000 years.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I loved it. I just, as you were speaking, I just went, I'm going to ask her these tough questions. I hardly ever ask these questions of anybody because most people haven't given it much thought. People ask me the questions, but I don't know too many people who've given it thought. I just know some very angry people. And I was very angry growing up, but I'm not angry now. I love people. I don't care what they are. And I don't want to like cut them all at the knees. I want to see people flourish and live, live the life they were meant to live. So
Yes.
now people can get in touch with you if they go to Speak Sex with Eve. They can.
No, okay. So the websites are speaksexpodcast.com
Okay.
or Eurydice, EURYDICE.net or eveurydice.com. And I'm on whatever, Instagram, Facebook, but I hope that, this book will come out soon. And then that will be a way to, send it out.
Yeah.
So I'm working on something that I call the universal mother income.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And what is that going to be a book or what is that? What is that? Like what?
It's a book, but it's a whole kind of, conceptual, like systemic change for the culture, that I think is a necessary like first step. Because unless we find a way to free motherhood, right, from this control, we can't move forward for any of us. Yeah.
Just beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being my guest today. It's a very what I hope for my listeners is that it's thought-provoking, that they may be looking at something that's so, it's so common, and yet did they look at it like this? Could they see it this way? Would they consider themselves a victim of this? Would they consider themselves as being trapped by this? And those are the things I want them to think about. From hearing you, if you feel trapped, if you have felt trapped, if you never thought about it before, give it some thought and
Yeah,
see
yeah,
what
yeah.
see what it
And
does.
play the podcast, because the podcast or the YouTube, if people like to watch or whatever, there
Yeah.
is a lot of this kind. This is our conversation. So, the more you hear about it, and the more that this point of view becomes familiar to you, the more you understand it in your life. You become aware of the instances or the moments in your life where unconsciously, because you have been conditioned this way, you act in ways that don't match your belief system, but you don't really know it.
Listen, a very outspoken and wild friend of mine yesterday posted on Facebook that she was accepting rough sex when she didn't want rough sex. Like she likes rough sex, but she was tolerating painful sex and not speaking up. Even her, she was not speaking up. And she realized that she needed to have a conversation with her partner and say, sometimes it just doesn't feel good. And what a revelation it was that she was speaking up about this. And I thought, oh my God, this is every woman I know. This isn't just this wild woman. This is everyone. We settle for things that maybe a thought goes like this, but then it's so ingrained. The culture is so ingrained in us that we just keep the mouth shut and we endure. And I love what you're saying because while you were stitching,
Yeah, really, that's it. Yeah,
while you were stitching, you were thinking about this, and you were coming into a power that's
yeah,
it's actually in your DNA.
yeah,
You the power of being female and
yeah,
the things that have been
yeah,
transferred. So anyway, I thank you. I
yeah.
love that. This was very mind expanding. You were like LSD today.
I'm gonna quote that.
Awesome. Really, really awesome. All right. So this is Laurie Handlers. Again, I want to say that you want to hear more from Eve or Eurydice. However, you want to find her both ways. You want to hear more from her. You want to maybe see her art. You want to pick up a book. If this opened up a mind expansion for you, a body expansion for you, then you should find her. Thank you so much for being my
Thank
guest
you,
today.
Laurie. Thank you.
Yeah, so much fun. So this is Laurie Handlers saying thank you for being my listeners. Thank you for always being here with me and for sending me feedback about the shows. I love hearing from you. I would love hearing from you again. Remember to write to me. Let me know how the show's going for you. Tune in next time. We'll have another amazing guest. Different and amazing. I'm signing off from Sex and Happiness. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.